matter how great your car is, you can still fall foul of long journey boredom unless you've a decent in-car entertainment system. Of course, these days cars don't just have music systems available, but all sorts of navigation and traffic jam busting gadgets, as well as in-car TV or video games for the kids in the back. But we didn't always have things so good.
Well, if you were lucky enough to have any kind of in-car entertainment, that was first class, and you would have had a unit something of this size with big dials and wheels, and there'd be things like Luxembourg and Hilversum and what have you on the dial, and it were wonderful days. You could twiddle with the knob and always make it better than it sounded originally.
And the worldwide thirst for better quality and smaller equipment gave the Japanese an inkling to get in the manufacture game, where they were to dominate, but they didn't get it right at first.
Yeah, well, the 8-track cartridge was the first time that stereo modern music was available at will in the car, and it was quite a status symbol to have the 8-track cartridge laying on your rear parcel shelf so that everybody knew you had an 8-track.
These are some I've dug out, one I made earlier. This is an old Trio one, which is around about 1983 this was first produced, and you can probably see on it hundreds and hundreds of buttons and a very tiny display. We then got into the, as you had yours stolen, we took some note of that, and we produced a theft prevention chassis. We can actually pull the whole radio out and take it with you. So you left your car completely empty, and also you can see on that as a wider display.
The compact cassette revolutionised car radio. The most important thing, of course, by virtue of its size, meant that it could end up being usable in the DIN slot that we know today, instead of the huge, great lumps of hardware that you had to have with the 8-track cartridge.
When compact discs arrived at our homes, we all enjoyed their crackle-free clarity. But in the first years of in-car use, they skipped and skipped and skipped. So installers covered CD players in layers of foam rubber to absorb shock.
A lot of the people that were actually installing these products into cars actually did remember very well the 45 singles and how sensitive they were to vibration. So their first port of call was to cover the compact disc player in foam rubber to absorb all the vibrations and shock. But in actual fact, that was the worst thing that you could do for a compact disc player, because it wasn't able to have a jittery movement like this, because the memory and autocorrection, etc., wasn't there in those days. So that was actually the worst thing. Had you have bolted it firmly to the chassis at both the nose and the rear side, then the impacts would have been like that, and the machines had shock absorber systems in them that were able to cope with that kind of impact.
The arrival of the skip-free CD opened up an enormous expansion in the in-car entertainment market. It was bonanza time for everybody.
The market was crazy for car stereos at the time. No cars didn't come with radios or stereos. It wasn't normal to have a radio in the car. It was ridiculous. If we didn't have 10 or 20 pieces of a particular item in on a Saturday morning, it was wait time opening the shop. It was just crazy. It was fantastic times.
The war began between manufacturers as to how many features you could put on an in-car unit. But of course, the more buttons and parameters to alter led to a much more complicated unit to use.
They are fairly simple once you get used to them. It's like living with anything. The one that we put in the bin, fortunately, was as simple as you could get, really. It was sort of my first hi-fi of any description. But now, you know, the stereos you get now, some of them are dual buttons, so they're quite simple. Once you get used to it, they'll perform two functions, but I say it's very, very simple to go through.
FM to medium wave, long wave, back to compact disc or a cassette. Then there are alterations that you would wish to make to the tone, balance, etc. of that material. So those functions still exist on almost all car audio systems today. But of course, the more sophisticated the system is, the better able it is to cope with all those different things.
But how do new audio systems get designed? This is the Alpine Evaluation Center in Japan, an advanced facility which includes a sound lab which evaluates car acoustics so that audio systems' power output, equalization and speaker placement can be optimized against road and wind noise. This is the lighting simulation room, which enables engineers to analyze the visibility of in-car displays under all kinds of conditions and in any hour, in any country, in any season. A radio wave shielded room is essential for determining the influence of radio waves and equipment performance. What's more, Alpine, unbelievably, have a test course to ensure their audio and navigation equipment still functions perfectly under the worst knock-around conditions, particularly useful to ensure compact disc systems are shock-proofed and don't slip like in the old days.
I remember the early days of CD, £699, £799 for a single slot CD. Absolute terrible. Used to skip. The clarity was there, but they weren't consistent. These days, £200 for a radio CD combined.
This is one of the workshops of Auto Audio, a Manchester-based organisation who specialise in customised systems for all sorts of vehicles, including many open checkbook jobs.
It was created in 12 days by myself and the guys here for one purpose, to show how good that an install could be. It had to be an awesome install to match the car, and it also had to be ready in 12 days for the finals at Wembley. As you can see by the bonnet area, we had to keep a little bit of storage as a going away bag, etc. But we used a lot of perspex, aluminium and polishing to create a different theme than the average. All the panels were retrimmed in the Alcantara to match the original car. Space is very limited, and to get a very good sound from this, we had to have a lot of power to make it dynamic and to sound as good as possible. Behind the passenger seat is one 8-inch subwoofer in a very small box, which is powered by 2 very big amplifiers. Each of the doors consist of a 6-inch mid and a tweeter. Again, each amplifier is bridged, producing a lot of power, and each amplifier produces about 300 watts going to each door. The whole of the centre console here to take an EPX, which is crossover, EQ and the master volume. As you can see, the main brain for it was polished to match the amplifiers. The Lamborghini comes with a 6-inch speaker here on a flat panel. So we could enable us to get a tweeter and a more powerful mid-bass speaker, we constructed this panel here, made out of MDF, fiberglass, and then trimmed with the Alcantara and finished off with the aluminium to match the rest of the car.
Next week, more stunning audio systems and competitive vehicles, and how the mini disc is taking over from CDs as the practical in-car digital medium.
Do you fondly remember the Mark II Escort, the Capri, and of course the unforgettable Cosworth? They just don't make them like they used to, now do they? Well, Ford would tell you that actually they do, and it's called the Puma. At first glance, the Puma may seem to be far too pretty to be in the same category as those motoring legends. And whatever you think about the trendily labelled new age styling, you've got to agree that it's striking, it's dramatic, and it does without doubt deserve and always get a second look. But still, it's too pretty to be taken seriously, I hear you sneer. And horror of horrors, it shares its chassis with the Ford Fiesta. True car enthusiasts everywhere will of course rest their case at this point. But hang on just a minute before you dismiss the Puma as another Vauxhall Tigra. A sporty looking bit of fluff for the girls to drive. All talk and not a lot of action. If you're serious at all about your driving, ignore the Puma at your peril, because you'll be missing out on the kind of drive that will send a shiver down your spine and put a smile on your face. Ford's designers and engineers must have been having a great week when they settled down to design the Puma. This is one car that feels like it's been designed by people who love their cars and who want you to love the Puma as much as they obviously do. Everything about it has been put together with a lot of thought. The Puma's body may well look like a sculpted work of art, but Ford have actually remembered the interior as well, which is something of a rarity in the car world. OK, so the dashboard is straight out of the Ford Fiesta, but look at the nice little touches they've added to it. All this lovely shiny chrome, dials that glow green in the dark, the beautiful steel gear stick, and of course the cute little Puma badge just to finish it all off. But all of that is simply the icing on the cake. The Puma could be as ugly as the Lada Riva and it really wouldn't matter. Because once you put the key in the ignition and turn it on, that's when you realise that this is no tarted up Fiesta. The Puma is a bit like a selection box. It's packed with more treats than are really good for you. It has an all-new 1.7 litre engine, 16 valves, variable cam timing and class-leading torque. Who cares exactly what it does or how it does it? Just take my word for it, it all works together perfectly. The Fiesta's old 5-speed gearbox has undergone a radical makeover and been shortened, and it just begs to be flicked through those close-ratioed gears. The throttle needs just the lightest of touches to send that rev counter soaring and the Puma accelerating like, well, a bit like a Puma. 0 to 60 in 8 seconds and a top speed of 130 miles per hour. Ford have paid attention to the suspension, making it tougher, not too firm, but just enough. Enough to ensure superb, precise handling and the kind of agility at corners that you'd expect from something with a much higher price tag than its £14,500. Now, if you're not drooling by now, boys, and you still have a few doubts about the Puma's pedigree, then let me tell you this. The chassis, well, it's been developed by Ford's clever engineers in the Special Vehicle Engineering team, chaps who really like their cars, the chaps responsible for the Escort Cosworth. I rest my case.
The 166 is the latest car to join the Alfa Romeo range, and it completes a process of renewal that began in 1994. And the 166 is a flagship, and as it becomes a flagship, it's big. Not that being big means it doesn't look good. To me it looks smart, like a bouncer in a very expensive dinner suit. These 16-inch alloy wheels help. They kind of fill out the arches and make it look big and mean and add to the image. But one of my initial impressions concerned the headlights, which to me at first glance look decidedly screwed up and small. But in the same way that if you say a word over and over again, gradually it changes its sound. If you look at a car lots and lots of times, gradually it starts to look different. And now when I look at these headlamps, I tend to see them integrated in with this rather neat grille unit as one unit. And it actually looks quite good and quite different. But there is one overriding and one most important feature about this car. And that's this, the badge. You see, what we have here is a large European car. And large European cars in this sector have traditionally been a complete flop. Witness Renault and their Safran and Peugeot and their 605. They certainly haven't sold in big numbers. Which means this car is going to go into the ring against some pretty heavyweight opposition. If we think about it, we've got BMW's 5 Series, we've got Audi's A6, and of course we are treading into serious Mercedes territory here. So what's it going to have that the others haven't? Well, it looks good, but then it could be said that so did the Peugeot and so did the Renault. It offers great value for money. For one thing, it's cheap to buy in the first instance, and then having done so, you get just about everything on it. But then so did the offerings from Peugeot and Renault. The one thing that it most definitely does have that they perhaps haven't got is that badge and that heritage. Mr. or Mrs. Company Car Driver want their large company bottom to be cosseted by a large company car, like this one. It fits the bill. But then so did the Renault and the Peugeot. No, it has to be more than that. It has to be more than all the gadgets and gizmos that they demand, and it all comes down to the cachet of the badge. That perhaps is where the French manufacturers fell down. And that perhaps is why Alfa Romeo have covered this thing with Alfa Romeo badges. The people at Alfa are doubtless going to be hoping that the work they've put into the fantastic 156 and the warm response it received from all and sundry is going to pay off when it comes to the 166 and mean that people are going to be more than happy to buy Alfa. The image has always been right, their history, their heritage, the pedigree. Fact was, they used to fall apart. Well, the 156 shows no signs of doing that, and at first glance, neither does the 166. The exterior looks fantastic. Slide inside and it's absolutely beautiful in here. This is one of several trims available inside. It's called the sports trim, but it's indicative of the standard of all of them, and it's beautiful. Detailed touches abound. There's badges everywhere. There's beautiful stitching. It's very well put together, very comfortable, very practical, ergonomically very sensible. There's useful hatches, plenty of oddments storage. Then you've got to get on the move. Well, there's going to be 4 engines in total. At the bottom, but it's unfair to say that, is the 2-litre 4-cylinder twin-spark. It's unfair because that's the classic engine in this standard of car and a classic engine from Alfa Romeo. There's then going to be that same engine with a turbo fitted, which will be an awful lot of fun. There's a 2.5-litre V6, there's a 3-litre V6, and ultimately there's going to be the 2.4-litre turbo diesel called the JTD, which will be absolute state-of-the-art. It'll be direct injection, common rail, everything going for it. And interestingly, both the diesel and the 3-litre V6 will be fitted with a 6-speed manual gearbox, which says a lot about the way Alfa are going to be marketing the diesel and the importance of that being seen as an increasingly sporting brand. This is the 2.5-litre V6, and I have to say that of all of them, it's my least favourite for the simple reason you're not in the 2-litre 4-cylinder, which is working hard for you. You don't have that same sense of achievement, and neither do you have the grunt of the 3-litre V6. That said, it's a great engine, willing, practical, needs revs to be driven as you'd expect from a fairly small capacity V6, but give it those revs and it does return with great performance. What can beat the squeak of denim on leather? The leather in here is an optional extra, but given that the prices in the UK are expected to start at around about £23,000, the car is going to be priced very competitively against the opposition from Germany anyway. And for that £23,000, you do get electric windows front and rear, a fair amount of kit, including, most importantly, for me, the best gizmo of all, which is this screen. It's a kind of central unit that contains the controls for pretty much everything. Integrated control system, we've got our main and audio, we've got our air conditioning system controlled through here, we've got our navigation system, trip meter, climate control. It's actually quite clear and quite easy to use as well, which is pretty refreshing if you ask me. In the inevitable compromise between sports driving qualities and the comfort demanded by the company car driver, Alfa Romeo have definitely erred on the side of comfort, but that's to be expected. The 156 really is there to be the driver's car. Having said that, yes, there is a degree of body roll. Yes, if you push it through corners, it does start to lean a bit, but there's plenty of grip there, and it is very controlled body roll. It makes for quite a pleasant drive. There is a good compromise here. The rear suspension from the 156 is carried over onto this, the 166, so a multi-link rear suspension setup and a degree of pre-programmed oversteer. So if you lift off midway through a corner or midway around a roundabout, the car will turn in nicely, which makes for overall a pretty pleasant driving experience, and it makes for the best compromise really between being able to carry 4 people in comfort and style, and if you're out on your own, have a bit of fun as well, which if you've got an Alfa Romeo, you're going to want to do, aren't you?
One of the biggest areas advance in engine design is diesels. In the last 15 years or so, they've improved enormously from the slow, clattery things they used to be. And probably the most significant step forward recently has been in the field of direct injection diesels. The first to combine multi-valve cylinder heads with a small direct injection diesel engine are the engineers at Opel in Germany on their Ecotec TDi 16 valve. Manufacturers have been using 4 valves per cylinder for some time in petrol engines. They improve the fuel airflow within the cylinders to allow more efficient burning of the mixture. By combining this feature with direct injection technology, Vauxhall Opel have optimised the efficiency of their diesel engines. Currently in 2-litre form for the Vectra and Omega, and from the spring in 2.2-litre form for the Sintra, the new engines are at the forefront in emissions control, thanks to high injection pressure made possible by the new head design. Aided by an integrated platinum-coated oxidizing catalytic converter, the emissions are approximately 20% below the EU 96 standard. Emissions of nitrous oxide are reduced further due to 45% of the exhaust gas being recirculated to the combustion chambers through a special passage in the cylinder head. All this extra efficiency makes for improved performance over previous Opel diesel designs, to further reduce the image of diesels as being slow and cumbersome. There's also the added refinement of balance shafts on the Ecotec diesels fitted to the Omega and Sintra models. With VW in particular pushing the boundaries in recent diesel development, the Ecotec signals that Vauxhall Opel don't intend to be left behind. Overall, the new Ecotec diesel promises much, and we look forward to comparing it with older designs in a future programme.